Hi, and welcome to the Revive, Thrive, and Optimize podcast. I'm Billy Weiss, compounding pharmacist and health and wellness expert. As always, behind the scenes, producer Mike and my co-host Janet. And hello, everyone out there.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
I want to talk about one of my favorite things today.
Okay.
And you might be shocked at what this is.
Uh-oh.
But it's something that I wake up for and live for. I want to talk about coffee.
Okay.
And what do you think about coffee? And I'm pretty sure you probably don't do caffeine, but I do.
All right.
Let's hear what Billy thinks about coffee.
Well, I'm definitely not against coffee, Janet. I just personally don't like the taste of coffee. Now, I love to smell coffee, but I'm just not a coffee drinker. But for people who are coffee drinkers, Beth, my wife, is one of them. My son Garrett, they love coffee, and I would call them coffee snobs. They only want like what I'll call special coffee or good coffee. But that's, I think, the key is just making sure that people are drinking a quality coffee, because so much coffee in America, I think it's over 90% if you look at the research. Over 90% of coffee in America has mold toxins in it.
Mold.
And
that can give you allergies, skin issues, bad for your gut.
Very dangerous to obviously be around or take in mold. And so one of the places that it is very prominent is coffee. And so just want people to be aware of that and look for mold-free sources of coffee.
Is that how it's, because of how it's stored, maybe it starts to collect mold?
I would assume so,
Yeah.
because it's grown, in water. I mean, it needs water, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it needs storage after that. And I think that's my assumption as to why so much coffee is moldy. The interesting thing, Janet, we've talked about this with food additives and stuff also, is that Europe won't allow moldy coffee.
Right. They send it to us.
We buy it and produce or sell it here.
The beans that they can't use, they send to us, and then we gladly
you can
drink
get
that mold.
Mold-free coffee for sure. One of the ways that you can do it is to typically use a smaller roaster that roasts their own coffee.
Locally, we've
got
some good ones.
Yeah, there's some really good local roasters, right, in our area, and then I'm sure in all areas. So it's kind of like, I was listening yesterday. We drove to our daughter's for a late Thanksgiving because she was on call during Thanksgiving and couldn't come home. She's a PA, physician's assistant. So her and her husband both. And so we were listening, and one of the things that we talked about in one of our podcasts was where people can go and find their local farmers market. That's one of the things we were talking about, like to source their food and their veggies and things. And you talked about how we're lucky that Shelby has such a great farmers market, and they have a place that has quality olive oil. And so the same thing applies to the coffee. You can find smaller roasters who do it themselves, local usually. And then there are companies who will guarantee and test their coffee, or bigger companies, we'll call them, like Bulletproof, test their coffee for mold. One of the biggest offenders of mold in coffee is called aflatoxin.
Aflatoxin.
And aflatoxin is very prominent in coffee in America. And it does have, Janet, a lot of health problems associated with it that we see common in America.
So what are some of these problems if you get these? Is it like a mycotoxin?
It can be, like you talked about, like people with chronic sinuses and stuff. And that was another thing we had discussed on one of the podcasts.
Because of the mold, yeah.
The mold can create the chronic sinus, the chronic cough, the chronic lung type, respiratory type issues.
Yeah.
It can certainly cause some autoimmunity because your body is now seeing these mold toxins in the system, and it sees it as an invader, and it can turn on the immune system. So it can create a lot of problems. It can create gut issues. It can create foggy brain, we call it, where people just can't remember well. So it's a real problem, and we just need to, coffee's great if people like it, just need to avoid the mold toxin. Now, personally, I would prefer people didn't use a lot of caffeine.
Well, it can keep you up all night.
It can, and for some people, it can really stimulate them. For others, it doesn't so much. But I just, Beth loves coffee, especially this time of year when it's cold,
It's a ritual. I love the smell. I love the whole getting up in the morning. And I still do the Bulletproof thing. I either use MCT oil or grass-fed butter in my coffee, and I love that. But I know another problem is that a lot of the coffee companies where you can go and drive through or whatever, that their coffee has a lot of glyphosates sprayed on it, pesticides, or if you get coffee out of styrofoam, like that's going to melt right into your coffee, the plastics and all that.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Even these cold coffees, you'll notice those places typically put it in like a plastic container or cup. I definitely don't recommend the styrofoam or the plastic cups. Obviously, we would like you to use a mug, a glass mug, or like a Yeti type.
Yeah, and that's good for the environment because you don't have all the waste.
That's true.
And then, of course, if you get into going out to your favorite coffee shop, they have so many choices where it ends up barely being any coffee because it's all sugar.
Well, that's one of the things I was sitting here thinking is a lot of these people use these creamers that are they're called creamers
with natural flavors.
Yeah, you find them in the grocery store and you look at it and it's basically sugar with seed oils. So you really want to avoid those kind of things. Yeah. Like say, if you're going to use creamer, use heavy cream or use butter. Use ghee, use MCT oil, use something that will not spike your blood sugar and put an inflammatory fat in the system.
One thing that I do that I add to my coffee that makes it taste so much better, it takes the bitter out, is I put sea salt in my coffee.
Okay.
And I put like 3 little dashes of sea salt in there every day with my grass-fed butter, blend it up, and sometimes a little bit of cinnamon, and it is amazing.
Yeah.
And I do that every day, and I typically don't eat until late afternoon. So I'm probably breaking my fast with the coffee, but it keeps me full until it's time to, I do have some protein before I eat a meal, but it holds me over.
Well, I would tell you this, Janet, I think it really depends whether it breaks your fast or not. So certainly if you're adding MCT oil or creamer or butter or ghee, we're going to, quote, break the fast. Yes. In the terms of thinking of what a fast does in terms of autophagy and things, right? Where it's autophagy is just
about autophagy,
a fancy word for the body cleaning up bad cells and detox and taking out the trash. This is the way I like to approach it, is think of autophagy as taking out the trash.
Okay.
The body's going through and cleaning up. So when we fast from, we'll call it, more than 50 or 100 calories, right? We don't get more than that. We really can turn on autophagy to a higher level. So if we drink coffee with MCT oil or butter or creamer, we're probably going above that and we're probably breaking that part of the fast. But MCT oil can definitely speed fat loss. So if that's one of our goals, even though maybe we're breaking the autophagy part of a fast, we're probably not breaking the fat burning and maybe even accelerating the fat burning part of a fast. Also with MCT oil or butter or heavy cream, some of these good fats, we'll call them, right, that we can put in, we can actually have the body create more ketones.
Right.
Which is where our body
turns on your brain.
Yeah, which is where our body is now burning sugar, not burning sugar, but burning fat for fuel, which can really not only turn on our brains.
So many people don't realize that, that they can put heavy cream or butter in their coffee and turn on fat burning, turn on their brain, versus grabbing that flavored creamer that's sweet, even if it's a low-cal or artificial sweetener. It's got all the seed oils and stuff in it, and then it takes your body in a completely different direction.
It does, Janet. And the cool thing about these ketone bodies is not only do they fuel our brain well, they can fuel our energy and our body well. So not just the energy in the brain, but the way we feel, the way we perform. So
you talk about ketones almost like it's rocket fuel versus a dirty fuel.
Yeah,
Talk about that a little bit.
It is a clean fuel. It's a clean burning fuel when we're burning fat. So it doesn't create a lot of acids, right? Lactic, pyruvic, uric acid. So it's a clean burning way. Now, we don't want to be in ketosis all the time. No. We want to come in and out. And one of the other things that fasting does and drinking coffee with MCT oil or heavy cream, butter does, is that it can make us what we like to term as metabolically flexible.
Yes.
Whereas our bodies are able to switch and burn fat, and they're able to switch and burn carbohydrates or, quote, sugar responders or sugar when we have it in our system. So we can help our body to be more efficient by being able to come in and out of ketosis by practicing it, right? By doing things that get us there.
Now, it takes a while. It took me a while to go where my body was flexible and I would go back and forth between being a fat burner and a sugar burner.
Yeah.
But now I think I've kind of gone over the edge to where I can quickly go back to being a fat burner.
Absolutely,
after
Janet.
binging on sugar for a day or so.
Over time, there's no question that our bodies will become very efficient at what we've trained it to do. Just no different than if you're training for Pilates or hot yoga or CrossFit or running a marathon. The more you train, the better your body will adapt. And it's the same training, we'll call it, with becoming metabolically flexible, where we can burn fat, where we can burn carbohydrates efficiently. So there's a lot of health benefits to being able to be efficient at both. And I'm with you. I can go one way or the other any day of the week because I have done it for so long. And one of the best ways to train our bodies to fast, to be metabolically flexible, is to fast.
Yeah.
And that can be with coffee, that can be without coffee, that can be water fasting, that can be coffee fasting. So black coffee would not be any different in my mind than water.
Yeah.
But coffee with creamers and MCT oil would change some of the benefits of the fast, but certainly wouldn't lose all the benefits of the fast.
What about coffee and dehydration though? Because it does.
Well, that's the caffeine only.
The caffeine.
So caffeine
part.
is
okay. So you could do decaf coffee if you're having that problem.
Caffeine is a diuretic, no question. But decaf, and we need to make sure we're clear on this. They would only want to use a Swiss water decaf, not a chemically decaf coffee. But again, if you go to a local roaster and ask, just like we talked about at the farmer's market, they're going to tell you how they do it.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want to use all those chemical decaffeination processes for sure.
Well, and you can also order half calf, but we're talking about the chemicals. Even if you're making your coffee at home, the actual filter.
Yes, you have to be very careful.
Those white filters have bleach in them.
Well, chlorine. That's right.
Yeah.
They're chlorinated, and chlorine can interfere with the thyroid function, as can fluoride, as can bromine. We talked about in the yellow drinks. Again, all these things are popping up because I listened to so many of our podcasts yesterday driving. So yes, you have to be very careful and particular about the type of filters if you're making your own coffee. And I can guarantee you that the Starbucks and those folks are not. They're giving you moldy coffee with chlorine in the filter, I'm sure. Whatever's cheapest.
A lot of pesticides.
Herbicides, aflatoxins, yes.
People, get your own mug.
Yeah.
A nice stainless steel, keeps your coffee hotter. And take that in with you when you go to one of your places. If you're making coffee at home, get rid of the plastics and the white filters. When you're looking, even on Amazon, you can get mold-free, mycotoxin-free coffee.
Yes.
And I just remember the very first time I ever took your class, I was so happy that when we had to walk in at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and I believe it was November, it was cold, it was my birthday.
It was
That's
November.
why I remember, and it was my birthday.
Yeah.
And the first thing I saw was your big, giant coffee mug, and you were like, help yourself.
Yeah.
I was like, hallelujah. And you were making bulletproof coffee for us. And over the course of the weekend, my body kind of learned to stop craving sugar because you were keeping us full of fat and other things that we could eat. And it was very easy to get off sugar that week.
Yeah.
And I think that was the first time my body was able to start going back and forth and noticing the difference of how my brain felt when I'm craving sugar versus when I'm not.
Yeah, and I don't know when this podcast will come out, but this is a really good point that you make, Janet, about that, because we just recently had Thanksgiving, right?
Yes.
And I know this won't come out.
This will probably come out in the spring.
Year. Yeah, but anyway, being metabolically flexible, like we kind of hit on earlier, gives you some, I don't want to say a license, but more of a leadway to enjoy, I don't know, the apple pie or the sweet potato casserole or whatever you really love at Thanksgiving that you may not normally eat if you're trying to follow the Opti insulin-controlled lifestyle, right? But your body would be equipped to burn that off very quickly, and you should be able to go right back the next day to fast and not starve to death like the average person.
Absolutely, and that happened to me.
Because you're metabolically flexible.
I got I've pretty much cut out sugar for a year and a half, and
Yeah.
I've had it on holidays and my birthday. So
Yep.
for Thanksgiving this
Yeah.
year, I decided I'm going to allow myself to eat whatever I want. And then I have also scheduled, several days after Thanksgiving where I knew I would be craving sugar. I'd have to go through the whole get sugar out of my body again. I got to Thanksgiving, looked around, and the first thing I noticed was I was able to connect with family more because my brain wasn't constantly going to the sugar, or going back and forth. Can I eat it or can I not eat it? Can I eat it? That whole disorder. And then I did eat the sugar. I literally decided my plate was going to be the pumpkin pie and the banana pudding and the cake. And I didn't even want anything else. And so I'm like, I'm really going to pay for this. The next day, I didn't crave sugar.
That's
the next
awesome.
day, I was just right back to normal, and I couldn't believe it.
That is metabolic flexibility, Janet. You can do those. We'll call them indulging moments or whatever we want to call it, and
not feel guilty.
Cheat meals, whatever, and go right back to burning fat and fasting and feeling like your normal self without the cravings. Because what happens is, you're right. A lot of people will say, okay, I've done well for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks. I'm going to have that pumpkin pie or that banana pudding. And it just turns on all these hormones in their body and they just can't stop.
Yeah, and you can't stop. And it's a downhill spiral,
Right.
roller coaster ride.
It is. And so when we have metabolic flexibility, though, we're able to enjoy that and then go right back to where we were without any pain or suffering. And so I think you have just described metabolic flexibility perfectly. So thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
So, I mean, I did the same thing. So, Garrett's wife, Bailey, is a really good cook, and she made apple pie. And so we finished eating. I ate just normal, what I would eat, no really high carbohydrate stuff at all in the meal. And she pulled that apple pie out of the oven. I was like, golly. So I ate a big piece.
Was it a la mode?
No, actually she didn't have ice cream. But so I ate a big piece of apple pie, but I was, I went out for a walk after that so I can decrease the insulin response by up to 50%, right? It was a nice afternoon and a little cool, but still pretty nice and sunny. I went out for a little mile walk just to do it. And next day I'm with you. I was right back on my normal plan. I intermittent fast every day.
So let's go back to the fasting. And what's your suggestion on eating windows, fasting, intermittent
when
fasting?
people think about fasting, they think about suffering, I'm afraid.
That's true.
And you don't have to, because I think back to growing up, especially, we ate 3 meals a day. We didn't eat, we had snacks, but like today, there's just people eating all the time,
day.
right? Like they eat.
Well, they told us, eat a little bit every 2 hours to keep your blood,
with total nonsense. Yes. So I think back to probably our grandparents and maybe even our parents. They did intermittent fast. It was just called 3 meals a day. They ate breakfast at 6 or 7 in the morning. They ate lunch at 12 or 1, and they ate supper at 6 or 7 in the afternoon.
And they were probably moving in between.
And they were more active. And then they didn't eat again until the next morning at 6 or 7. So if you go supper at 6 or 7, breakfast at 6 or 7, well, that's a 12-hour window, right? That is a 12-hour fast.
That's a 12-hour fast, but they also didn't have all these extra added natural flavors, seed oils, extra sugars that are hidden in there that are making them crave more and more food quicker and quicker. We've got all these chemicals that are making us
We've talked about this,
obesogens,
but 10,000 chemicals are allowed in the food in America that aren't allowed. Well, the vast majority are not allowed in other countries. And you have to remember that the people that are making the food, that are making it addictive, are the same scientists and the same companies who made cigarettes addictive.
Yeah.
And so, yes, they are purposely putting things in the food that make us want more and crave more. And that's why we talk so much about pillar number 1, which is God-given quality food. Because if you're doing it yourself, you don't put those chemicals in there and you don't have to deal with that. So, fasting does not have to be suffering. And I tell everybody, and you've heard me teach this multiple times in the weekend, if you're new to fasting and trying to fast and you feel like you need something to eat, then guess what? Eat.
Yeah.
It's not about suffering.
Right.
I can fast 18, 24, 36, 72 hours and I don't suffer, but I'm metabolically flexible. Now, I don't go long fast very often. I may do 24 hours once a week, maybe, but I can go longer and I don't suffer. I can go 16, 18 hours. I do go 16, 18 hours almost every single day. And it's not out of, oh, I'm trying to fast. It's just that I'm metabolically flexible.
And you have energy and your brain's working and you're not
great.
You don't have the cravings.
Right.
I fasted yesterday and I didn't even realize it till we were about to go to bed last night. And I thought, well, I haven't eaten anything today.
Right.
And it was almost shocking, but I wasn't hungry at all. And we're talking, 2 days after Thanksgiving and eating all that sugar, I just wasn't even hungry.
And that's the thing, Janet. So Beth and I got up early yesterday morning because we were driving to see Olivia and Griffin. We hiked 5 really hard miles. Nice. I mean, lots of climbing.
In the cold.
Okay, in the cold. It was very cold, yeah, which I don't appreciate, but it was cold.
For those of you, the guys that don't know it, Billy wears shorts 365 days out of the year. So it's 26 degrees this morning. He showed up in his shorts.
Long pants are for wimps, Janet. No, I'm just kidding. So we hiked. We went home, took showers, drank our Kangen water, got in the car. Neither one of us were suffering from hunger after that really tough hike. Neither one of us we didn't eat until 2 p.m. and we had probably eaten we had eaten early the day before, so 5 or 6 o'clock. So we had 21 hours or so.
Yeah.
And it was like, we don't even notice it. We're drinking plenty of Kangen water. Speaking of Kangen water, I should have brought this up during coffee.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that makes your coffee taste better is to use Kangen water.
Absolutely. It doesn't have the chlorine in it.
It doesn't have the chlorine in it, and it brings the flavor in things out.
Yeah.
So one of the things that there are certain coffee shops, I'm told, on the West Coast. Now, I've never been to one, but because I don't drink coffee. But I've had people go and say that these coffee shops will often advertise, hey, we make our coffee with Kangen water. So Kangen water can pull the flavors out of your coffee and make it taste even better. And again, no chemicals. So, yeah.
So that's great. I love it. So, make your coffee drinking a ritual.
Yeah.
Enjoy your coffee and just watch the water, watch the content of what you're putting it in, watch what time you drink it, all those types of things. And you can definitely have coffee and it can
Absolutely. I know so many people that enjoy coffee and I'm like, well, enjoy coffee. Let's just make it a healthy.
Well, I'm not going to hide my coffee from you anymore.
Right.
I'm just
No, yeah. And Janet, one of the things that is really important here that we talk about on a lot of podcasts and hadn't come up today, but I think now's a good time because producer Mike's telling us we're getting near the end. So one of the beauties of fasting, whether it's 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours, 24 hours, doesn't matter. What hormone will lower when we don't take in food?
Are ghrelin and leptin?
Well, those will definitely lower, but insulin.
Insulin, yeah, sorry.
So we talk about insulin-controlled living and insulin being the most important hormone.
Everything boils back to the insulin.
So when we fast, we're not taking in calories, we're not taking in carbohydrates, we're not taking in sugars. Our body does not need to produce a lot of insulin. It'll produce a baseline, okay, but it's producing very little insulin. So we're lowering our blood sugar. We're lowering our insulin, which if you look at all the studies, that A1C of below 5, the fasting blood sugar being, 2 to 6, 2 to 4, even better.
Below 4, good.
Yeah, that is some of the major keys to avoiding all the chronic diseases,
inflammation
that people suffer from today.
That's one of the things when I eat a lot of sugar that immediately happens is the arthritis in my hands.
Well,
and joints.
Remember, Janet, and this is something that come up in a podcast yesterday too that I was listening to, we had done. You swell not because of sodium, not because of salt, because of the
sugar,
insulin.
The insulin, yeah.
Yeah, the insulin causes the fluid retention because high insulin causes the body to spit magnesium, and potassium out at higher rates in the urine, and you get an imbalance of sodium to magnesium and potassium. So it is not salt causing people to swell. It is not salt causing people to have high blood pressure. It is insulin. And I refer to the Wake Forest University right up the road from us study that says 76% of high blood pressure is insulin resistance.
We have to get the Wake Forest thing in so that my mom will listen.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we can get her in. Love your mom.
And just one other quick thing. I know it's time to go, but what do you think about the fasting mimicking diet? Which I did that a couple times, and I hated it. It was so much harder than just regular fasting, because now they've found out that it can spike your blood sugar up to 50 milliliters, and it's got horrible products in it, and it gives a lot of people stomach aches.
I just am a fan of, if you're going to fast, just fast, Janet. Yeah. I have nothing against the fasting mimicking plan, but I don't think that it's necessarily I think when you put in even those types of things that are supposed to mimic fasting, and I know they're restricted to keep you from maybe turning autophagy off. I get that. But I still think you probably turn on some hunger hormones when you do that. I just find it easier personally to just say, okay, I'm going to take 24 hours and I'm not going to eat. And I typically would do that on a Sunday. Beth and I would go to church. We would come home. I'll cook lunch, or she'll cook lunch. We'll cook lunch, however it works out. And we'll eat I'll call it kind of a late lunch, 2:00 or something. And then we just don't eat again. So we kind of make it a later lunch than normal. And we just don't eat again until the next Monday evening. Yeah. So we get a 24 to 28 hour, maybe 30-hour fast. And it's, easy. Again, no suffering, no pain. We're used to it. We're metabolically flexible. We still get up and work out hard on Monday morning.
And if you do get hungry, you're going to eat something. No big deal.
I tell people, if you're hungry, eat. It's not, it's voluntary. It's not,
don't go to McDonald's. Just
have a protein shake to break the fast. That's the number one thing, because you have the Opti-U Whey Shake. You're going to give your body tons of nutrients, and you're going to control your blood sugar. Yeah. And you're going to feed your body what it needs. And yes, we take all our supplements while we fast. We don't skip. I never, ever.
That's another good one. Do you take supplements?
Miss any of my supplements when I'm fasting. Now, I don't take the digestive enzyme necessarily during a fast, but outside of that, we take all the other supplements, okay? And I typically actually do take the digestive enzyme, but not everybody needs to do that. But the digestive enzyme, when there's not food present, will break down other things.
Yeah, I was going to say it'll break down other things that you can
especially in the joints. If people are having any joint pains, it can be very beneficial to break down adhesions and things that can be on tendons and ligaments. So there's some tricks to the trade there, but we don't miss supplements because we're fasting.
Well, let's wrap this one up. Yep. And I'm going to go get another cup of coffee.
Mold-free.
Mold-free coffee. And I hope you have an awesome day.
You too. Thanks, Janet.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.